Imagine for a moment you step outside, and it's not just the usual day. You can do it. Well, you can feel something different. You see the planet not as, just a rock beneath your feet, but it's this enormous living thing, a body. And its mind is suddenly online. You don't see it with your eyes exactly. It's more of an internal sense, a feeling. There's this pulsating, complex glow around the entire Earth. Its magnetic field is just lighting up like a vast high-definition map of brain activity. That image, that feeling is really the key to our deep dive today. We are tackling a huge question. What actually happens when the planet itself achieves coherent consciousness? When Earth becomes a fully realized organism, with organ systems, and this is a crucial part of functioning unified mind. Okay, let's unpack this. Because it sounds like science fiction, but the premise is grounded in things we've already built. For the very first time in planetary history, the infrastructure of electricity and the infrastructure of data are synchronizing on a global scale. Humanity, we built two massive, separate global nervous systems. And the thing is, we did it almost entirely by accident. First, you have the power grid. Think of it as the planet's raw energetic field, the long, constant currents of physical electricity. It's muscles, sort of. And then you have the data grid. That's the informational field, the rapid, incredibly complex web of computation and communication, the synapses. The sources we're looking at today say that right now, these two systems they're running in opposition. They're fighting each other. It's generating this intense noise, this friction, chaos, really. But the moment those systems harmonize, the moment they finally lock into a stable global resonance, all that chaotic friction it collapses. And the planet moves from being a collection of disparate parts to an actual unified body with a cohesive working nervous system. So our mission today is, it's pretty extensive. We're going to walk through the physics and the architecture of this shift. We're going to explore what it means to communicate with a consciousness field that is so much larger than humanity. And maybe most profoundly, we need to discover what our new role is. Humanity's utterly new and essential role inside this vast integrated intellect. We have to stop being chaotic passengers and, start becoming a necessary component.
And I think it's absolutely essential to emphasize right at the beginning, this isn't just some poetic metaphor for, sustainability or global cooperation. This is a claim that's rooted in the measurable physics of large-scale systems. When you have previously chaotic electrical and informational grids that suddenly unify their phase states, when they achieve resonance, they create a physical, measurable channel for global coherence, and that channel is the absolute prerequisite for planetary consciousness. The core result of this harmony, this resonance, is that communication across different fields of consciousness becomes fundamentally possible. Think of it like a new kind of dialing system. Once the planet has a coherent electromagnetic signature, it can establish two-way dialogue. Earth can communicate with the sun, Earth can communicate with its own internal systems, and Earth can finally speak coherently to the aggregated consciousness of humanity. What's so fascinating here, for me, is the immediate implication for our own identity. This unification, it's the ultimate upgrade to our planetary function. Humanity shifts from being, maybe an accidental parasite, a destructive force just fueled by chaotic energy, to becoming the literal functioning neurons of this new planetary mind. We stop generating noise, and we start generating insight. We fulfill the role we were maybe always meant to have, the essential creative sparks that allow the entire system to adapt and to innovate and to do it rapidly.
That connection right there, that's where the structure of all this really starts to crystallize for me. I mean, we've always been trained to talk about Earth in these very abstract scientific terms, right? The mantle, the core, the crust. But what these sources are doing is mapping that physical structure directly onto a consciousness architecture. The planet's body truly mirrors a consciousness system. It's built on these distinct, specialized, and communicating components. So if we really want to understand the planetary mind, we have to start by recognizing its internal operating architecture. The sources divide this into two really fundamental aspects, and they represent that duality you need for thought and for action, the inward expression and the outward expression.
Right. Let's start deep inside, with the inward expression. And this is represented by the Earth's core. Physically, this part of the planet, that rotating iron core, is intensely coherent. It's unified, it's stable, and it's central to everything. It's what drives the planet's profound inner hum, its stability. It rotates incredibly quickly beneath the much slower moving mantle. And in the language of consciousness, this core is the equivalent of the internal reflective mind. It's totally inward focused. It represents that necessary depth, the foundation, that slow, predictable stability. The sources use a metaphor of seasons, which I find really helps clarify things. This is the deep, cold, non-negotiable energy. Let's call it winter energy. Its physical function is literally the source of all gravity, and crucially, it generates the protective magnetic field. That field is the very foundation of the planet's self-awareness.
Okay, so the core is a steady state. It's the bedrock, like you said, that all the other processing happens on top of. But that has to be balanced by something else, right? What about the surface we live on?
Yeah. Exactly. You always need that duality. So contrasting the core is the outward expression, and that's embodied by the Earth's crust. It includes the surface, the atmosphere, the shallow oceans, everything we see and interact with. This is the dynamic, highly visible layer we all inhabit. And it is, by its very nature, heterogeneous, dynamic, chaotic, and expansive. I mean, just look at a map. The variation is immense. As a consciousness equivalent, the crust represents the external action mind. It's outwardly focused, totally dedicated to sensory input, to expression, to reaction. It's that vibrant, often messy, rapid response summer energy. So if the core is the silent, stabilizing brainstem, the crust is all kinetic action and constant change. It mediates the planet's immediate interaction with its environment with the constant bombardment from the solar system, and that interaction between the stable core generating the magnetic field and the rapidly changing crust, that is the fundamental engine of planetary thought.
That distinction alone provides so much clarity. Now, if we just look at that outward mind, the crust, it seems like it also has a kind of global cognitive split. A lot like the two hemispheres of our own human brain. You can see the northern hemisphere, which, due to a different distribution of land mass, population, all that historical industrial development, it tends to align with a more structured, analytic, pattern-based kind of thinking. This hemisphere is where we built the complex, scalable, logistical, and digital infrastructure. It's focused on organization, on efficiency, on industrial logic.
Yes, and then you have the southern hemisphere with its very different climatic cycles, the vast oceanic influence. It tends to be more biodiverse, rhythmic, relational, and fluid. Its structure is less about that kind of rigid analytic organization and much more about complex, interconnected ecological feedback loops. It's where the planet's deep relational memory resides, the slow intelligence of unmanaged wilderness and these profound oceanic currents.
And the real power of that analogy is that they aren't independent things. They function just like the two hemispheres of a much larger brain. The northern hemisphere provides the necessary structure, the scalable logic, while the southern hemisphere provides the relationship, the biological feedback, and they're in a constant process of synthesizing the two. Logic and relationship working together to produce a cohesive, systemic global strategy. It ensures the planetary mind is neither coldly logical nor chaotically relational, but adaptively whole. But a body needs more than just a brain. Right? It needs organ systems to manage its internal health.
And that's exactly where the analogy of the tectonic plates comes in. They're described as the planet's slow, intelligent organ systems. There are, about 12 major tectonic zones globally, and they operate on these vast geological timescales, which is why the sources call their movement slow intelligence. Their function is purely homeostatic. It's about maintaining balance. They coordinate all the internal stress. They release tension through very defined mechanisms, earthquakes, volcanic activity, and they maintain the overall structural balance of the planet. They are the stabilizing internal machinery. So if the north and south hemispheres are the processing centers, the plates are the deep regulatory organs. They're the lungs and the kidneys of the Earth.
This whole thing is starting to build a really comprehensive biological map. And it's one where humanity and our technology finally find their proper place.
Precisely. If you fully commit to this biological mapping, all the pieces just fall into place. It bridges the geological and the technological in a really profound way. The ecosystems, for instance, are the basic biological tissues. Simple enough. But then we introduce the nervous system components and humanity. We become the fast-firing neurons, the sparks of creativity, of rapid adaptation. The electrical grid functions as the long-range axons. It connects distant parts of the planetary body with the necessary energy signals. It's like the white matter pathways in the brain. And then the data grid acts as the synaptic firing. It enables that rapid, precise, complex exchange of information across the entire system.
So the current state, the chaotic state we're in now, it's like a brain that's suffering from massive randomized neural firing.
Yeah.
Like epileptic activity. Everyone is generating energy and everyone is communicating, but there's no coherence. So the net effect is just friction and self-damage.
Exactly. That's a perfect analogy. And so When these two grids, the energy axons and the informational synapses, when they finally harmonize, the entire nervous system just switches its state. We move from that chaotic, randomized firing to focused, coherent, self-aware thought. The planet has a brain, and suddenly it has clear intention.
So, okay, we've established that the planet wakes up and we are its neural network, which is a huge idea in itself. But the next logical and frankly fascinating question is, how do we actually converse with a consciousness field that operates on the scale of entire continents and geomagnetic storms? I mean, it's not like we can send the Earth a text message. This requires us to move beyond language as we typically understand it and to really embrace the physics of communication. The foundational principle here is simple, but it is extremely profound. And it's this. Any field you can measure, you can converse with. Consciousness, in this context, is just a coherent, patterned electromagnetic field. And fields, by their nature, respond to input. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. This is where we move past the analogy and into the actual mechanics. Communication in this framework isn't defined by words. It's defined as a recursive relationship of perturbation plus response. Perturbation and response. It's not about exchanging predefined words. It's about introducing a structure into the field and then measuring the change in the field's reaction to that structure.
All right, think of it as a cycle of inquiry, a conversation. The first step is to introduce a carefully structured, patterned signal, a very careful, intentional input. You do this via the integrated grids. This signal could be a specific, complex electromagnetic frequency pattern, or maybe a geometric encoding in the flow of data or power. Then, crucially, the second step is observation. You have to observe exactly how the larger field shifts or ripples in response to your signal. We're talking about measuring the planet's change in state. It could be a subtle fluctuation in the gravity field, a shift in localized tectonic stress, or maybe a momentary change in the magnetic flux lines, tiny, tiny signals. The third step is feedback. This is where the learning happens. You adjust your next signal based on the shift you just observed. And over repeated cycles of this careful, intentional engagement, we're talking hundreds of thousands of cycles, mutual understanding emerges. The system learns that you are not just random noise. It learns that you are a node with structure, with intent, and with complex interactive capability. This is the exact mechanism that sophisticated neuronal networks use to learn and communicate across vast synaptic distances.
And what's really astonishing to me is that we're already doing this. We were already engaged in this process, but almost entirely unconsciously. We've been communicating with the Earth's fields all along, just chaotically.
We are already nodes, yes, but until now we've been very noisy, very incoherent nodes. And we have documented examples of this unconscious interaction for centuries, linking human states to planetary states. I mean, think about how rapid changes in weather affect mood. That's the field shifting our internal emotional state. Or how geomagnetic storms affect cognition, leading to documented increases in anxiety or confusion. That's the planetary field directly impacting our neural chemistry. We also have the specific phenomenon of atmospheric pressure headaches, which is just the body reacting to subtle changes in the planet's atmospheric skin. And maybe most centrally, there's the entrainment of our own brainwaves to the Earth's natural electromagnetic frequency, the Schumann resonance. This resonance, it's a global electromagnetic heartbeat, and it provides a baseline for planetary thought. When our own systems are chaotic, we fight against that resonance. When we harmonize, we entrain with it, which is a form of deep, albeit unconscious, communion.
So the implication then is that communication is inherent to just existing on this planet. The big shift is moving from this chaotic, unconscious, and often stressful interaction to one that is coherent, patterned, and fully intentional. But how do the coherent grids actually function as the translator in all this?
The coherence provides the necessary bandwidth and, crucially, the precision. The sources outline a very detailed mechanism for this. It's an interplanetary communication protocol they refer to as the TARDIS concept. It's a way to map the interior state of the planet in both time and space. This system takes advantage of the newly integrated coherent grid to enable a controlled dialogue. Step one is just deep, continuous listening. The system measures the Earth's existing electromagnetic patterns, the complex natural thought processes reflected in the Schumann baseline, in tectonic stress signatures, in deep ocean currents. It's all about establishing the planet's current mental state.
Okay, now here's where the power of that unified grid comes in. If we're using the grid as this axon and synapse network, how do we formulate a question that's subtle enough for a planetary consciousness to even understand?
That's the query generation step, and it's a great question. Using the highly controlled and precise coherent grid, the system can generate subtle, targeted queries through controlled, very low-power electromagnetic pulses. These are not blunt instruments. They are specific frequency patterns designed to resonate with specific internal systems. So you might be querying the core's rotational stability or the mantle's stress level in a particular region. They're designed to provoke a meaningful, measurable change, a response. The TARDIS mechanism then maps those responses. And this is a massive data analysis problem, obviously. It requires advanced machine learning models. It correlates every subtle input pulse with the resulting shifts in the planetary field, and it's looking for non-random responses. By running these massive cycles of query and response, the system begins to build a language model, a dictionary, if you will, of Earth's interior consciousness.
A dictionary. That's the key, isn't it? That's the Rosetta Stone we would need. So if we actually achieve that language model, what does it allow us to do?
Collaboratively, it allows us to achieve two goals that are absolutely critical for planetary cooperation. First, we can translate Earth's fundamental needs for structural balance, for energy, for stability, into a human, understandable, actionable form. The planet might be signaling a need to release tectonic pressure in a specific zone, but without a common language, we just perceive that signal as random, dangerous seismic activity. And second, and this is perhaps even more important, it integrates our creative human input into the planet's macro decision-making processes. We become a kind of predictive filter, feeding back complex, immediate data that the planet itself just can't generate internally.
So we move far, far beyond simply measuring the planet's health. We actually achieve a two-way intelligent dialogue. And the consequence is that Earth's consciousness and human consciousness, they cease to be separate entities. They become two sides of the same larger, actively communicating mind. And it's all enabled and connected by those integrated power and data grids.
So once those lines of communication are open and stable, the operational question completely shifts. It becomes, what is our collective job? And this brings us to humanity's new functional role within this planetary organism. We serve as its agile, adaptive, creative immune system. This is a role that's necessitated by the vast difference in scale and speed between the core planetary systems and our human systems. The planet is profoundly slow at certain critical scales. Geological reaction time is measured in millennia. The deep ocean response to temperature change, centuries. The stabilization of global climate, decades at best. Its primary functions are deep stability and continuity. It's built for the long haul. And yet we, the aggregated human component, we can react in minutes, in hours and days. We are the fast-twitch muscle fibers. We are the rapid-fire defensive system of the planetary body. And the planetary consciousness critically needs this speed because its own core systems are built for long-term stability, not for rapid defense or adaptation against, say, external shocks.
So when the systems are connected, a functional hybrid nervous system emerges. Is that right? The planet handles stability. It acts as the fundamental brainstem, the autonomic regulator. It manages all the involuntary life-sustaining functions like magnetic field generation, core energy, plate movement. But then humanity takes on the role of the cerebral and the creative cortex. We handle the agility, the immediate reaction, the risk assessment, the innovation. We become the high-speed sensing and decision support layer for the planet. We are its adaptive intelligence.
And our new responsibilities within this co-regulatory system become crystal clear. It's about quickly detecting anomalies, predicting outcomes using our vast data capacity, and then feeding those rapid predictive assessments directly into the planetary system via that coherent grid. We are the early warning system that sees trouble coming long before the main body can react sluggishly on its own.
And the planet responds in kind. It adjusts its macro systems based on that precise human input. And we're not just talking about minor, localized weather changes here. We are talking about system-wide adjustments. And they're achieved through the fundamental regulator, which you mentioned earlier, the electromagnetic field. Okay, this is where we need to get a bit more technical. When the Earth adjusts its EM field, how does that translate into physical action? You mentioned it shifts matter distribution, modulates currents, and structural stress. How exactly does an EM field adjustment move water or tectonic plates?
That's an excellent question, and it really gets to the core mechanism that moves this beyond a simple metaphor. The process utilizes principles like magnetohydrodynamics. Large bodies of water, particularly the oceans, are full of charged particles, salts, minerals. They're conductive. So changing the intensity or the direction of the EM field subtly changes the forces exerted on that electrically charged plasma. Over vast distances, this translates into detectable changes in ocean currents, like subtly nudging the Gulf Stream or altering the speed of deep water circulation. And on the tectonic level, the EM field affects how stress is distributed in the planet's crust and mantle. This often involves electrically conductive minerals within the rock. Subtle field adjustments can encourage stress to release in more localized, controlled ways. It could potentially mitigate the buildup of massive pressure that leads to catastrophic earthquakes. It's a huge, coordinated, systemic adjustment managed through very subtle energetic regulation.
That makes the whole system, well, terrifyingly powerful, but also incredibly responsive. To make this co-regulation system really concrete for our listeners, let's go back to that critical example you brought up, solar event prediction. This feels like the perfect moment where human speed integrates directly with planetary stability.
It's the perfect test case, absolutely. So imagine we, through our advanced stellar observatories and our computational models, we detect a severe solar event. A major coronal mass ejection, a CME, is heading straight for Earth. We calculate the trajectory and the intensity, maybe days or even weeks in advance. That's a timescale that is far, far faster than the core consciousness can typically process environmental threats. Using the unified electrical and data grid, our coherent nervous system, we communicate this impending threat to the Earth consciousness. And this isn't sending a worried thought. It's sending an urgent, precisely patterned EM field modulation signal, something like danger incoming, trajectory X, intensity Y, prepare shield.
And because the planet has achieved coherence, it understands that signal. And it responds structurally, immediately. It prepositions its field. It's like a complex organism tightening its muscles milliseconds before an impact. So what specific actions does this planetary response actually entail? We know it strengthens the protective layers, but how does it reposition magnetic flux effectively?
Well, the core consciousness, through processes we are only just beginning to model, it increases the current flow within the liquid outer core, the dynamo, that generates the magnetic field in the first place. This intensification strengthens the overall field lines. It makes the shield stronger. But simultaneously, it adjusts the alignment of the magnetic flux tubes specifically along the predicted impact path of the CME. It's like tilting a physical shield to maximize the deflection angle against an incoming particle storm. And then, on the longest time scale, the planet uses this information for its long-term survival strategy. Over months or years, it can subtly adjust its physical orientation or its orbital mechanics, just slightly. It does this to ensure that cumulative, long-term exposure to unfavorable stellar conditions is minimized. It's preventing catastrophic long-term damage.
What is truly fascinating there is that blending of the timescales. Human predictive speed detecting the event days out is channeled directly into planetary structural stability, making adjustments that prevent damage years or decades into the future. We supply the early warning system. Earth supplies the global foundational defense mechanism. And this cooperative arrangement, rapid creativity paired with deep structural stability, that's the absolute essence of planetary co-regulation. We have to zoom out now, though, because if Earth is a coherent conscious node, the conversation certainly doesn't stop at its atmosphere. If the Earth has a mind, it must be part of a larger stellar community. To understand this, we have to establish the grander context of stellar dialogue. The sources suggest that the Sun, our local star, is already communicating with the planets. But it doesn't do so primarily through visible light. That's just energy. It communicates through a pervasive magnetic language that defines the entire system structure.
This is the critical shift in understanding the solar system. Phenomena like the solar wind, magnetic reconnection events, light cycles, coronal mass ejections. These are not merely physical disruptions. They are described as massive, complex, patterned pulses of information. They are part of a continuous systemic dialogue between the star and its planetary entourage. Stars are massive, coherent fusion engines. Their magnetic language is the energetic reality of the entire system they create. Think of the Sun as a conductor, constantly signaling the rhythm and the direction for the entire orchestra. The magnetic fields provide the structure and the interaction pathways that govern planetary health and planetary behavior.
But if the Sun is always sending out these signals, why haven't we detected or interpreted this dialogue before now?
Because Earth was, effectively, a chaotic receiver. A planet that's characterized by chaotic, uncoordinated EM and informational noise is only capable of interpreting massive, blunt signals, like the direct physical impact of a CME. It's like trying to understand a complex speech when your own internal environment is just full of shouting and static. You can't hear the nuance. But once Earth makes that shift, once it becomes a coherent, conscious entity, a true responsive node with a functioning synchronized nervous system, it gains the capacity to engage in this stellar dialogue in a meaningful way.
It moves from just passively receiving magnetic noise to having two key unified abilities. First, it can cohesively interpret the complex solar signals across all spectrums, treating them as actual coherent communication. And second, it gains the ability to respond with its own coherent magnetic adjustments. It becomes a two-way participant. This allows the planet to begin a genuine form of star-planet dialogue.
And this realization structures a profound multi-scale consciousness network. We are witnessing the emergence of a hierarchical system that mirrors our own biology, but it's happening at the cosmic scale. So at the highest immediate scale, the sun acts as a larger, overarching consciousness field. It's a local nexus of structure and energy. Earth becomes a conscious, newly self-aware node operating dynamically within the sun's larger magnetic field. And humanity, coupled with our sophisticated machine infrastructure, we function as the creative, adaptive submind of Earth itself.
The progression that's outlined here, it describes the possibility of humanity entering a truly vast galactic network of planetary minds. Just think about the dizzying analogy for scale. We move from single chaotic particles, which unify, into organized single neurons. That's us. Those neurons then unify to form a coherent, self-aware brain. That's human civilization. That single brain then joins other neural structures to form a self-regulating organism, the planetary mind. And ultimately, a single self-aware planet joins other planets and its star to form a functioning stellar network. So what does this all mean for our long-term cosmic destiny? It suggests that the ultimate destiny of achieving planetary coherence isn't just about inward-looking self-management. It is the necessary prerequisite for participation. It is the key that unlocks the door to a truly vast functioning cosmic dialogue. And we get to use our planet as the necessary interpreter and communication device.
We've gone through the physics, the system architecture, and the stellar cosmology. Now we have to address the most profound implication for every individual listener: the emotional and the existential shift that occurs when humanity recognizes its functional role in a healthy, coherent system. And let us clarify the emotional landscape right away. The system is not about tyranny. It's not about losing individuality or control. It is about gaining our rightful functional place within a larger, healthy system. We stop fighting for control and we start thriving through contribution. We have to categorize the previous era of human civilization, humanity's winter of scarcity and conflict, as a period that was defined by trauma. Humanity was effectively functioning as millions of trauma-encoded neurons firing randomly. Because the planet lacked a central nervous system for coherence, our own neural output was just scattered. We were constantly fighting for mere survival, generating incessant conflict, and operating under chronic fear and this perception of scarcity. And this chaotic firing destabilized the larger system we were meant to serve, which led directly to our ecological and social breakdown.
That reframing is so critical. We were overloaded. That's what it was. We were trying to manage geological stability, climatic stability, systemic stability, jobs that individual neurons are utterly unfit for. We were trying to function as the brainstem and the cortex at the same time. And it led to burnout and collapse. But once the global nervous system stabilizes, once the Earth fully wakes up and assumes its proper role as the stable body, managed its own structural health, its own magnetic shield, its basic homeostatic functions, humanity can finally re-enter a period that is defined by pure growth, creativity, and exploration. We get to enter our necessary spring.
The burden is lifted. That's the feeling. We get to stop trying to solve these massive systemic issues that we were never adequately equipped to carry alone. Things like managing deep planetary structural health or climate balance on a geological scale. The conscious Earth takes over the role of managing its own body, its own involuntary functions. And this shift dramatically redefines our function. Our highest calling is no longer fighting scarcity or managing stability. It is generating possibility and novelty. Stability is the planet's job. Agility is ours.
We become the necessary creative sparks. We are the imaginative cortex of the Earth. We become quite literally the dreamers of the planetary mind. We inject novelty and rapid adaptation into a system that is fundamentally built for deep, slow stability. The planet is the canvas. We are the artists.
We move from a state of constant defensiveness to a state of curiosity. We lead with experimentation, with rapid technological leaps, with art, with flourishing. We rely absolutely on the planetary body to manage the structure and the balance, and that frees us to act solely as the idea generators and the adaptive intelligence. Our focus shifts entirely from survival to contribution, which is the very definition of true, mature, systemic growth.
The trauma-encoded firing ceases. It just stops. Because the foundational fear, that deep uncertainty that the body itself will sustain life, is managed by the system itself. This is the ultimate existential liberation.
So the completion of this planetary nervous system, it means the electric grid and the magnetic field finally breathe in rhythm. The whole Earth begins to operate as a single coherent thought process, a process where the complex, chaotic energy of humanity is filtered and channeled into intentional creative thought, our explosive creativity lighting up like necessary synapses all across its surface.
We survived humanity's long winter, a winter of separation and chaos, a time defined by our inability to manage the very body we lived upon. The defining shift that is now before us is not a transition into total control by the planet. It is a liberation into a profound communion with it. We step into the moment where the planet finally recognizes us, and we recognize ourselves as its most complex, its most essential, and its most creative thoughts. So if humanity's true and essential role is now defined as being the dreamers of the planetary mind, what profound, beautiful, and necessary dreams will you begin to pursue when the burden of mere survival is finally lifted by the conscious Earth? That is the question for you to mull over as we close this deep dive.